Founders Forum, episode 26.
Open your mind to a new episode of the Founders Forum, the podcast championing a free economy, sound assets, and blockchain solutions. Each week, your hosts, entrepreneur Cole Snell and economist Bob Murphy, interview pioneers and free thinkers to help you develop into the architect of your future.
Welcome back, everyone, to yet another episode of the Founders Forum. Today, I'm going to be speaking with Kelcey Lehrich, who is co-founder and CEO at 365 Holdings, which is a vertically integrated holding company of DTC-centric brands. They exist to build a high-performing team of growth-minded professionals that makes an impact on the landscape of consumer brands. All right, so the interesting feature, what's new about this particular interview that you're about to listen to, is that Kelcey is not merely a business owner, which is not unusual for the Founders Forum podcast, but runs a holdco, which holds ownership in many companies simultaneously. And so that's the interesting twist. And so I'll ask Kelcey to explain that. One point, I ask him to distinguish between people who own various companies in succession, right? So that, over a 10-year period, they can say, oh yes, I own several, or I started and ran several companies, but meaning one at a time, versus what Kelcey's doing, where he's owning and running multiple companies simultaneously. So we'll explore the differences in those two approaches. I would say, word for word, this is probably the most informative of the Founders Forum episodes we've done, in the sense that because Kelcey has assessed and bought and run so many different types of businesses, that he really has polished answers in all the different areas. And so I kind of just asked different things about, what do you do about hiring and firing? And, what do you do about, is retail going a certain way towards e-commerce? Is it not? Are the malls dead? That sort of thing. So we cover a lot of ground in this. And for those of you who are either currently business owners or are thinking of plunging into it, I think you'll get a lot out of this episode. Without further ado, here is my discussion with Kelcey Lehrich. Kelcey, welcome to the Founders Forum.
Hey, Bob. Thanks for having me.
So I think the best thing, as we talked about before we started recording, the best way to get into the position where you're going to be giving a lot of valuable tips and insights to business founders is, why don't you first just take a moment and explain,
Sure.
who you are and what you're doing right now, who your organization is.
For sure. Best way to describe me is I'm an entrepreneur. So 7 years ago, my business partner and I bought our first e-commerce business. And prior to that, we were doing all kinds of things. We had a lot of small offline service businesses. I had a stint as a business broker, selling small companies. And we were just trying to find our way in the world. 7 years ago, we bought an e-commerce business. And that was the foundation of the business we have today, which is a holding company of e-commerce brands. Today, we have a portfolio of 10 businesses, all selling physical products over the internet, primarily on our own websites, a little bit on Amazon too, but primarily direct from our websites. These 10 brands are all owned and operated by our teams. We have a global team of over 100 folks that runs the supply chain for these businesses, operations, marketing, finance, HR. We own and operate this portfolio of e-commerce businesses, and we grow by growing those existing brands that we have through product development and through marketing. We also grow through acquiring additional businesses. The holding company trend has been kind of fun, kind of popular lately. There's a whole kind of zeitgeist around multi-business entrepreneurship. And so a year ago, I started with another business partner, a conference called Holdco Comp, where we have owners and operators and executives of holdcos, 2 or more business portfolio, together for a live event for a couple days of relationship building, keynote speakers, breakout sessions, et cetera. I think that the trend towards entrepreneurs wanting to run a portfolio of businesses is only going to grow. And so we have an event and a conference business around that space as well.
Okay, great. So before we get into some of the specifics, let me just make sure we're not losing anybody.
Sure.
So for me, the term holding company or holdco, I think of it was economic history, back before the Sherman Antitrust Act, and it was the Rockefellers, and so they would come in and they would vertically integrate a whole industry,
Yep.
and they would have a bunch of hold companies, and so is that, at the very minimum, it means it's one company that has the shares of stock of other companies.
Yeah, if you Google it, the Investopedia or Wikipedia answer is, a company that owns companies, which is kind of leaves something to be desired.
Right.
Because different people will approach that differently. Is it a company that owns majority control of businesses? Is it a company that owns minority? Is it a company that owns real estate? Does it also own public stocks? It could be a lot of things, right? So it's a bit of a misnomer. I think when I say holding company,
Mm-hmm.
and what most people who identify as a holdco entrepreneur, we think of wholly owning and operating a portfolio of small businesses. Maybe it's vertically focused like us on e-commerce.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's diversified. We have a plumbing company, we have an IT security business, we've got a restaurant, and we've got a SaaS product. So it kind of can span that spectrum from very focused and more like a roll-up of buying a lot of things that are pretty similar, all the way to a very diversified holdco, like, say, Berkshire Hathaway. And a lot of us think about Warren Buffett as the original holdco, buying everything from Geico to railroads and Dairy Queen.
Okay. And so the basic business model is you identify I don't know, use the word target. I don't know what the word is. And then is it that they're like, they have promise? Like, does it have to be a kind of thing where there's something there, but you realize you could make it better? Like, because if you couldn't improve it any, there's no point in you buying it, or...
I think it depends on what holdco entrepreneur you talk to. I think for us, we certainly want to find a good quality business that we can add value to. We've done turnarounds, we've done healthy businesses, we've done a lot of things, but certainly I, as an entrepreneur, have a risk tolerance that wants to buy something that I can make an impact on. There are other holdcos that are incredibly passive. They just want a financial instrument to say, I'm buying this business. It has this risk return profile, and I kind of want to let it do its thing. Hopefully it grows, but I'm going to be kind of absentee in it. Our posture is very much of an operational posture that we want to buy assets that we can operate. We're pretty vertical in the way we approach businesses. We tend to centralize a lot of the functions of e-commerce brands that we buy to operate. Other holdcos might have a very thin home office staff, and they push all the operations down to the portfolio companies that really operate as separate. It just so happens they're all owned by a central source of capital.
Okay, so is then part of your model, like, is that partly how you do add value? Because there's like economies of scale that you need the same unit that does the same function for 3 different companies? Or?
For sure. We share HR, we share finance, we share supply chain, we share marketing, we do our own fulfillments, we share warehouse. For us, we get some synergies and some operating leverage through running multiple businesses using one shared services team. It has drawbacks too. You're not as focused. It's split your time between businesses. There's kind of pluses and minuses to that approach of sharing resources, but it's been one of the things that's been allowing us to grow using only debt. So my partner and I own the business outright. We don't have any outside equity. No investor owns any part of the business but us. We've built a pretty sizable organization through compounding retained earnings and borrowing money. I didn't have any capital. He didn't have any capital. We put we put thousands of dollars into the beginning, very, very minimal equity. And we now built that into a business that does tens of millions of revenue, employs hundreds of people. Like, it's a real company, thanks to sharing services, operating lean, and reinvesting all those earnings.
Was it just kind of slow and steady, or was it like you were hit at a certain level and then there was a quantum leap at some point?
Bit of both. So we tend to buy 1 or 2 a year. COVID was very good to us, thankfully. We're on the receiving end of a lot of demand in e-commerce. That was helpful. We certainly have made a lot of risky decisions that have paid off. The team has worked incredibly hard. It's taken a lot to get there, but it feels like a stair step. Going from 3 businesses to 4 feels very different than going from 9 businesses to 10. And each one of those takes a different amount of effort and lift. And as we've grown the business systems and process, it's getting easier.
Okay. Let me ask, was there a reason, like, had you personally had your own e-commerce businesses before? Like, is there a reason you focused on that?
Nope. I had no experience in e-commerce. We just thought it was a good asset at a good price. We thought that it could pay us well, we could make a living doing it. And we thought that the team we were inheriting when we bought that very first business, if they all quit, that Justin, my business partner, that he and I could figure it out. We were comfortable with the risk that we could take out a loan that was personally guaranteed. If they all quit, we could survive and run the company. And it was worth the risk. We'd make a good living. That was our entire thesis. 60 days later, we drained the checking account and we maxed out the line of credit, and we bought the second one because we thought, hey, this is great. Let's go.
You said 60 days later?
60 days later, yeah.
Huh. And was it, so how did that first, obviously with any of these, if you're not allowed to say so, but like, was the owner selling it and you said to your buddy, hey, we should buy this, or you approached the owner or how'd that work?
We've only bought things that are on market from brokers by and large.
Okay.
There's a lot of talk, I think, about finding off-market proprietary deals, and you need some special way that you find your foot in the door to buy a company. And if you can have that happen, it's certainly a fortunate circumstance, but it's very hard to replicate. It's very hard to build systems and process around. And you end up with a need for a humongously wide funnel of many, many opportunities to get down to one deal. when you have a business marketed by a broker that's actively for sale and you, the entrepreneur, are qualified to go buy it, you've already taken one of the biggest issues and kind of checked the box, which is I have a qualified seller. They hired a broker, they've gone through this process, they've talked to their spouse. Like there's a reason, there's a motivation, because the broker, for as much value as they do or don't add, some of them are better than others. The one thing they do is they make sure they're not wasting their time. They don't want to sign up a seller that's not serious. And so we've been fortunate to really only buy on market deals where we knew the seller was committed.
Okay, great. So I guess that's interesting even right there, that for people listening who are interested in this stuff, you're saying it's not like you're a sucker if you go to these listed ones and you do it like over the counter kind of thing. That it's not that you need to know somebody for this to be profitable.
I think it's harder to do proprietary because the funnel is wider. So the typical funnel, meaning you start at the top with the number of opportunities all the way down to what does it take to get one? What are the ratios as you go through time? Most business buyers looking at on-market deals might have a 1% close rate or less. If you're looking at off-market deals, you start adding decimal places, like 0.001% close rate, because you're just hitting up everybody, whether they want to sell or not. So it's much more of a pipeline management sales game to do proprietary searching for businesses that aren't really for sale. Even looking at businesses for sale, there's a lot of stuff out there that's not a good fit for you. They might be junk businesses. They might be a poor fit for you. They might have a geography that doesn't fit for you or an industry. Like it's a lot of work to go find companies to buy. I think that the average entrepreneur is best served buying a business versus trying to do like a Silicon Valley-based startup style, venture capital style business. I think that there are many, many good businesses that need to change hands. Federal government uses SBA loans to allow entrepreneurs to finance a lot of business purchase price through debt. And there's investors that will even back those transactions. I think that self-funded, on-market, small business acquisitions is a great way to make a living. Will you become a billionaire? No, you won't. Will you make a really good living on a risk-adjusted basis? Yeah, you probably will.
Okay, well, yeah, that's good. If you might elaborate just a bit. So I'm sure lots of people listening to our podcast, they're not quite yet business. They're probably like salaried employees, but they're dreaming of, oh man, if I could just own my own business, that'd be amazing. And so this is something that you're kind of saying, maybe, you don't need to start from scratch.
Acquisition entrepreneurship is the easiest way to get into business ownership versus I have to have an idea that's going to change the world. I have to start from zero. I have to pitch angel investors and venture firms, and I have to go disrupt something brand new. That is a much, in my opinion, harder road to travel, to have something so innovative that it has the chance of getting funded, let alone the chance of being successful long-term. But the local, distributor business in your neighborhood that sells plumbing supplies to all the plumbers in town is a great company. And the business that maintains irrigation in all the ponds and all the storm drains around town is probably a great company. And there's thousands of these businesses in every city and state that will eventually transact.
Okay, great. I guess probably the next logical thing for me to ask you is, what's your process for evaluating? In a perfect world, you could say like, oh, what we learned on, acquisition number 7 was this. And then, I don't know if you have any stories along those lines where like you realize what didn't work and now you don't do that again.
For sure. I think if you're going to be a serial business buyer, so I would fit that mold of a serial acquisition entrepreneur. You learn lessons, you get frameworks, you get bruised and bumped along the way, you lose some money, you pay lawyers, you learn lessons, and those things compound through time. I would put that advice into 2 categories. You get the industry specific category, and then you get the broad general entrepreneur category. So industry specific, I promise you, I know more about buying an e-commerce business than virtually anybody that's listening to this, because I've just bought more e-commerce deals. And I've been in e-commerce for 7 years now. I just know it really well. But I also know just broadly about business, and I might be a better buyer of a roofing business than somebody who's never bought any businesses before at all. I think that broad advice is more applicable because it does relate regardless of industry. You could buy a restaurant, you could buy a car dealership, you could buy a piece of software, and those principles are the same. I think having a really big target market is important. It needs to be just a really big business to grow into. Niches look profitable, but they're hard to grow. So big target market is really important. The ability to have quality revenue, so even if the revenue is not contractually reoccurring month over month like a subscription, having the ability to at least get repeat sales and to get the ability to raise prices on customers is incredibly powerful. Any business you look at, if you can't raise the price and you can't resell customers, it's a very, very hard business to run. And then the third one is just a growing industry. So If we have a big market that's growing and you can either get more sales from your same customer or get more revenue per sale by increasing price, those three things make everything else easier. That applies to oil changes, that applies to hamburgers, that applies to boat tours, that applies to home furnish repair, any business you think of. If you get those three criteria, it's a better business than any other business that doesn't have those three criteria.
Okay, it just, when you say the ability to raise prices on your customer, you mean just the nature of the competition and how that industry works, or do you mean more of like related to the product type?
I think that it's really the confidence of an entrepreneur to think that they can bump their price up. Do I think emotionally that I've been billing somebody $109 for an oil change and I'm going to come in as the new owner and charge $129? Am I scared of that? Or do I think that my customers are loyal enough to my oil change place and we have a good product and good service and good marketing and people will pay the extra $20? If you're so scared you can't raise the price because everybody else in town is cheaper, your customers won't pay it, that's a hard place to run a business from. If you think that you have pricing power and you deliver so much value that you can justify a price increase, it's a good place to be. Like, you should be able to command appropriate prices and appropriate margins in the business you want to run. If you're worried about pricing, you might be in a bad place.
Okay, and then do you recommend, like somebody comes in, they buy a new business, do you recommend like make a bunch of changes right away and still show everyone there's a new sheriff in town? Or
probably not.
Don't rock the boat, just do incremental things?
The common phrase in the space on that topic is do no harm. So the hard part is knowing what is harm and what is necessary. So if you go and you buy the local tree trimming business and the three people in the office have been there for 20 years and they do everything on fax, at some point, you want to move from fax to email.
Mm-hmm.
You probably don't want to do that the day you show up. There's probably a good way to do that without upsetting everybody that works there and to build some trust and some relational capital before you go in and bring a bunch of technology in. There's a fine line there.
So have you, so it does sound like you need to have a lot of different skills to be able to do this right. Like for one thing, to be able to work with people and not.
Acquisition entrepreneurship is primarily a leadership and decision-making and communication career. It is not I'm the best person with spreadsheets, or I'm the best salesperson, or I'm the best online internet marketer, kind of insert any technical proficiency, software coder. Having any of those abilities could make you better in that one discipline. But if you don't have the fundamental abilities to communicate with people with empathy and emotional intelligence, to make good, rational decisions and be able to be comfortable and confident in communicating this to people, to lead small teams of strangers who you now employ, and to talk to customers you never met, like, that's not exciting to you, don't go buy a business. If you think, hey, I'm pretty well-rounded and I've been in corporate America for a number of years and like I can go do those things, that sounds like what I do all day, I just do it at a corporation.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's probably the same skill set to go do it in a small company.
Like, do you ever acquire a company where you realize we're going to have to lay off a quarter of the workforce?
We have bought businesses that are heavily distressed in our turnarounds and have needed to have massive cost cuts done on day one. We have done that, yes. Also, because our nature as a scaled up platform with a team, many times we're a buyer that comes in assuming that we don't need many of the current people, and that many sellers also know that, and they sometimes position their business for a sale to a party like us, expecting that we will do that. And sometimes they've even planned and prepped that that's the case. So we've seen both ways. We've seen transactions where we're surprising everybody. That's kind of a tough conversation. And we've seen transactions where it's kind of set up for that from day one. For the typical average business buyer, you want to buy a company and you want to change very little. You want to get in there and you want it to do what it did the month or year before. You want to keep the wheels on the bus slow and steady until you really know what you're doing. With our first business, we bought a quick one 60 days later. We changed nothing. We didn't go through any staff in the first 3 months. We didn't make any massive changes. Like, we just kind of got in and did the business.
In those cases though, where you did acquire one, I'm just curious, do you have any tips? Like, if somebody else is doing something like that, like what,
for a distressed transaction or one where you need to have a tough conversation?
Yeah, that in any aspect, like, do you get rid of everyone fast so that there's not like this long period of everyone's just one by one dropping? Or like just short and sweet, and then like, or how do you do it? Or does that seem real curt and rude?
It's a good question. The real question that you need to answer before that is whether or not you're doing it or some other party is doing it. So there's some sellers that they know that a buyer is not going to take their team and they'll do layoffs and severances. So that's a thing that happens in small business transactions. If you are the responsible party to reduce headcount, you should do it very, very quickly. You should do it all at once. You should do it as deep or deeper than you think is necessary. You should have a really good plan to communicate to those people and to the team that remains what all is happening. And you should do it as quickly as possible. I had to do my first round of layoffs ever in my career, not that distant from Christmas this past year. We had a rough Q4. We were overstaffed, and I had to do a reduction in headcount and say goodbye to some really good people that we wanted to have on the team. And it wasn't their fault. That it wasn't a performance issue, right? We were just an operating business at that time. So it sucks as an entrepreneur to have a headcount reduction. Everybody that chooses this career path will at some point have to fire somebody, or will at some point have to lay somebody off. You will always, 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 always feel better after you do it. It's not fun. It's not enjoyable. They don't like it. You don't like it. 2 days later, you're going to feel really good and your business is in a better place, and they'll be on to the next thing.
Have you ever toyed with using like an outside, like what is that? Was that George Clooney? Was that one of those movie where he's
HR consultants?
Yeah.
So we do have full-time HR staff at our organization. I don't believe you should outsource relationships when it comes to hiring and firing. I think managers or leaders of business should hire and fire their own people. Should you have an HR person that keeps everything you do legal? Yes, like follow all the laws, do all the paperwork, all that needs to be done. I don't think you should hire somebody to come fire your employees. If you need to fire people, you are the leader, CEO, president, owner, operator, whatever title you give yourself. You should be the one doing that if it's necessary, because it's your decision.
Okay, and out of curiosity, so that sounds right to me too, what you just said. But I'm wondering, is it more like for your own emotional, like you actually need to be the one to do it, just so you're, you know what I mean, like you're more centered, or
I think it's a sign of respect to the employee.
Okay,
I think it's intellectually honest about what's happening. I think that it would be emotionally, I don't know what the opposite of emotional intelligence is. It would be off-putting to say, hey, this person's going to fire you today. Whether you're the person that's being delegated the firing task or the person being fired, it does not feel appropriate to me at all.
Right.
Yeah, it should be done by the person making the decision every time.
So you also had mentioned earlier that it was just first you and your partner, and then and you've grown to 100 plus employees. So how can you talk a little bit about, like, at what point did you guys say, you know what, we got to start bringing people on, and like, what was the planning, and how did you, were there trials and tribulations there? Like,
for sure,
going from just you doing everything to having to outsource some stuff?
Super painful to build a team if you've never done it before. If you're an entrepreneur, there's something you just pick up a textbook and know how to do. So we kind of found our way organically for a number of years. I think that a couple tools that were really helpful for us as we run our business using a system called EOS, fairly popular business management practice. We probably were a little late in adopting it. We probably should have done it sooner in a more rigid factor. They've got some exercises that help you figure out what your organizational structure should be through an accountability chart, who does what and what are they accountable to. The quicker you can get to a place where you're using a system like that is rules driven and not made up by you as the entrepreneur, probably the better. So if you get to double digit people, 10, 11, 12, 15, it's a great time to look at what system should we use to run the business. Do I think I'm so smart as an entrepreneur that I should make it up? Do I think I should hire somebody to tell me how to do it? Do I think that I should go buy a system off the shelf like an EOS or Scaling Up or one of these? How should we address this topic? My opinion is the easy button is you go do EOS. Not right for everybody, but it's a great tool for a lot of people.
Okay, and then how do you decide, there's some function that needs to be performed. How do you decide whether let's hire someone in-house to do that versus have a contractual relationship with some other firm that does that?
For us, culturally, we're very much build the team culture. So our values sit above that decision-making process. And our values are we want to build a team. And we want to have people that are on staff doing all these things. We're very vertically integrated. So for us, that's an easy decision. If you are not of that mindset, I think it's a financial and circumstances decision. Do I need to be full-time? Do I need fractional? What's my budget? What's the scope of requirements that I have? Should I hire this person virtual, local? And there's a lot of decisions to make there, assuming that you don't have some value standard that comes in over top of that.
So can you maybe speak a little bit? I know you touched on this already, but I'm just curious, like the sorts of things when how does it work? Is it the kind of thing where you're always looking and then, if the right business comes along, or is it dependent on, we just got an infusion of capital and now we got to go deploy it?
We're definitely always looking, 100%. I sign NDAs every week. We look at a lot of broker presentations, a lot of financials. I'll usually start at some very high level filters: industry, revenue, profitability, asking price. Like, we just started the high level stuff that matters, and we just keep going deeper. There's certain aspects that we know that we are better suited for. So we like businesses that have a vertically integrated supply chain. We would rather own and operate manufacturing, product development, and the creation of the things we sell our customers than buy products to sell to customers. So when I see a business that has that as an aspect, if I can sniff that out early, I'm going to spend a lot more time on that one than on a business that doesn't have that aspect. There is a lot of expenses that I know structurally we wouldn't have, like they use a third-party logistics center. We have our own warehouse. They use ad agencies. We have a marketing team. I started to see some opportunity where we could cut some expense and use our resources. I spend more time on those deals than on others.
Okay. Can you speak a little bit more? The organization you founded, that it's is that the 365, or that's a separate one?
365 is the holding company that runs all of our e-commerce businesses.
Okay, and then but the thing that has the membership,
our conference.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm in Northeast Ohio, and I had a friend in town named John. John runs a business that looks a lot like 365, except instead of owning a portfolio of e-commerce businesses, he has a portfolio of home service companies: HVAC, plumbing, drain cleaning, mold remediation. And we built a friendship and realized we had similar revenue, like within a couple percent, similar headcount, and similar problems. We needed to hire people. We needed to buy companies. We needed to borrow money. We needed to solve this like intercompany shared services. We had all the same questions. And we began building friendships with other people around the country who were also running holding companies that had the same questions. And I thought to myself, gee, wouldn't it be great if there was like an event or conference for people that identify with this? And we decided to host that event. So Holdco Conf is in its second year. It's in Cleveland, Ohio this fall. It was in Cleveland last July. And we get together founders, investors, executives, and entrepreneurs of 2 or more businesses to talk about all things Holdco. So we have some big name speakers that people might recognize that run massive holding companies. We have some speakers that are not household names that come and talk on unique topics, ranging from performance management to finance and everything in between. And we spend 2.5 days with breakout sessions and main stage speakers and fun events to build relationships, to build a community of people running multiple businesses and try to solve problems to scale these Holdcos.
Okay, that's very good. So I guess either pertaining to what you're doing, or when you hear the issues raised by other attendees of the conference, I'm curious. So you mentioned COVID, obviously, since you were acquiring e-commerce companies, that was a big shot in the arm for you.
Usually,
I'm wondering, did that promote the move towards holdcos in general, would you say, or not necessarily?
I don't think that was an impact, no. I think there's a certain demographic and psychographic profile that I fall into, and other people do too. That's kind of the intersection of like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the 4-Hour Work Week, and like Warren Buffett. If you put those 3 things in a blender, you get the kind of person like me who is at a place in life where they want to run 2 or more businesses. I bet you that a lot of people who hear this, like a light bulb goes off and say, right, yep, that sounds like me. And there's like, the reason why we throw a conference is there's other industries where there's conferences. Like you have a business in the crypto space. There's no shortage of crypto conferences and events. I have a business in the e-commerce space. I go to e-commerce events. There wasn't yet a Holdco event. There wasn't a place where the only thing uniting people wasn't sales. It wasn't the industry they were in. It wasn't a product or service they bought. It was this notion they wanted to run 2 or more businesses at the same time, just kind of a weird idea. And that's the uniting factor of kind of small business, Holdco entrepreneurs.
Yeah, it's funny, I'm a trained economist and I do a lot of work on entrepreneurship and stuff, but yeah, I had never really thought through the implication of like a Warren Buffett, like you say. It is, so what is...
And there's other big names too, like Constellation Software is incredibly well followed. Gigantic software roll up out of Canada. There's a business here in Northeast Ohio that's been rolling up aircraft part suppliers for years. They look like a publicly traded private equity firm, basically rolling up aircraft supplies. There's other names like Permanent Equity, Chenmark, Enduring Ventures. There's some people building some really big, really impressive businesses on the model of we're going to run a portfolio of businesses aligned to a certain set of values with a certain mission. And our goal is to be long-term holders and operators of quality businesses. There's a lot of people that resound with that trend in entrepreneurship.
So I hope this question makes sense. But what I'm trying to isolate and get. So is it that, because, in one sense, you're an entrepreneur that runs your business is just in the business of buying other business. You know what I mean? So in a sense, it's like, oh yeah, I founded a business and I'm the entrepreneur running that business. But yet, like you said, there's also a sense in which, but it's also, you're, so what the kind of person you're saying the thing that drove you and the similar like that, is it that part of what's driving it? Is it more, or here's the two possibilities, or you could say it's both, is one that, if I were just doing the same thing day in and day out for 10 years, I would just go crazy. Like I need to have new stuff.
Yes.
Okay, so that's part of it?
For sure.
Okay.
Let's see what the second one is.
Okay, the other one, door number 2, I hope I didn't just scare it out of my head. It was like, whatever it is that the ineluctable skill or the scarce trait that you have, that's your thing to leverage and your superpower, whatever, catchphrase we want to use, is something where like you can, again, like you're good at like spotting businesses. Oh yeah, what we have over here, if we got that added, we could boost that thing 10%. We could do it. And so
it is absolutely both.
Okay. All right.
Absolutely both. We use a personality assessment here internally called Culture Index. And if you were to learn what that assessment was and then read my report, you go, yep. Like if you're this guy, you want to buy 2 or more companies. And so I went and surveyed a lot of my friends, and we all had pretty similar profiles on this personality assessment that said, you're big on ideas, you're forward thinking, you have very little patience, you're not really one for details, you like to cast a big vision, very results oriented, and you get bored easily. And I'm like, like why wouldn't you buy 2 or more companies? It sounds like fun.
Okay, that's all right. So great. Yeah. So that's you. It's answered. That's what. So it's you're saying it's both your interest and passion, but also your skill set, like the things, your comparative advantage, to use econ jargon. Okay. So here's another question I'm curious. I could see that, but a different model that I know a lot of, like they call them serial entrepreneurs, where someone will go found a business or, buy an existing one and just spruce it up and just put their heart and soul into it for 2 years, sell it for a big profit, and then move on to the next thing. Mm-hmm. And so that's how they scratch the itch that, I couldn't just do the same thing for 10 years, but yet they really immerse themselves in the details of the one business and know it inside and out, and then make a boatload of money, hopefully, and then move on to the next thing.
If I had one opportunity, and only one, that I thought was worth pouring my 40, 50 hours a week into, and I could get a better enjoyment of life, better economic outcome, better value creation for my family and the world by focusing on one thing, if that was in my opportunity set, I would probably do it. I think I'm rational enough to say that. I also look at the portfolio of businesses I have today and think that not one of those yet, out of the 10 that we have, is so good that I should sell the other 9 and go all in. I think that most businesses are pretty average. Most of them aren't going to go to the moon. Most of them, no matter how good you are, there's diminishing returns on marginal work. And so, am I fully focused? No. Are we getting 100%? No, we're getting 95%. But the gap from 95 times 10 is better than 100 times 1, in my opinion, for my risk tolerance, my interest, my economic opportunities. If my circumstances were to change and suddenly this one thing could go to the moon, then I would probably change my approach. I think it's very hard to find really high quality businesses. I think we have a bit of a power law where every time we buy one, they always have a projection. It always goes up and to the right. It's always profitable. It always grows. Yet somehow time goes by and they don't always function that way. We have problems. They have challenges. The real world happens. And so I think part of what we're doing is we're getting a lot of at-bats that maybe one day I do find the thing that says, yep, this is the one. Let go of everything else and go all in. I just don't know when that will be. And in the meantime, I have a lot of energy, a lot of aspirations, and a lot to do, and a lot of opportunities. And so I think it's a valid idea. I think both can be true at the same time. You can have a diversified business that is your best opportunity until you find a focused business that is your best opportunity. I just don't know how to tell somebody with a crystal ball which one is right for them before they get started. You don't probably know until you go into it. Many people probably try to focus on a business and realize, man, I can't grow this thing, or gee, like the market's not as big, or I reinvested a bunch, it didn't work. Maybe they should have gone and diversified and had 2 businesses instead. I'm not going to pass judgment on that. I'm going to say that both can be true at different times for different people.
And I guess, too, the advantage of your model is if you need to, or not need, if you want to take a week off and go to the Caribbean or something, it's easy. Whereas if you're in this one bit, it's like, no, I can't leave the restaurant. or else
sure.
it's just not going to work.
But organizationally, both Justin and I, we've worked really hard for a long time. We're 7 years in, and now we can both take some significant time off, and the team is built with a leadership team, managers, individual contributors, and the business can run. We've reached a scale of revenue and headcount where that's possible. Not a single one of our businesses would allow us to do that by itself. Our group of businesses together, run as a portfolio, can allow both of us to do that simultaneously. So we've gotten scale by going parallel instead of serial.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I like that. Let me circle back. So you said something that caught my interest a bit before about you like to buy, ideally in a perfect world, it's vertically integrated, the ones that you acquire. And I was kind of surprised to hear that. I didn't even know there were businesses like that anymore. I thought everything was splintered. It's can you, whether it's yours or just in general, the concept, can you give some examples just so we understand, kind of what you mean?
As an economist, you'll love some of the pure supply and demand economics that happen in e-commerce. And so the fundamental kind of building block in e-commerce is this notion of a click. Click meaning I click from Instagram ads to a website. I click from Amazon to a product page. I click from Google to whatever. And the question is, what does it cost to buy a click? And what is the click worth to you in any one of these platforms? And if you own an email list, you can send quote unquote free clicks to your website. But this click is this unit of measure that is very pure. And it gets immediate supply and demand balance through big tech like Google and Facebook and Amazon. They extract maximum value from that ecosystem and leave as little margin as possible to operators in those businesses. So if you go to classic Porter's Five Forces, economic theory, supply and demand stuff, the best thing you can do is buy a brand. So it's a name brand, not a commodity, that has a sole source product, one that we make and customize and design ourselves. And ideally, you own the means of production such that you have pricing power and can control the variability of costs in your cost structure. So all of that leads me to believe that for us, as kind of a value investor posture, building a portfolio, if I don't have a competitive advantage on the click, I can't buy it cheaper than somebody else. I'm not better at Google or Facebook than somebody else. It's pretty efficient. The best thing I can do is invest in the brand. And the best thing I can do is build a great quality product with the lowest possible cost and build a moat in the form of supply chain to protect the durability of my business. If I make my product and you have to buy yours, you're paying a markup to that supplier. I'm putting that markup on my own P&L and keeping that profitability. So I think that's a better quality, more durable, more dependable business.
Okay, and so you're talking about things that are made within the United States and then they get put in your warehouse, or
so
they
one of our businesses, we own the factory in China that makes the stuff.
Okay.
Two of our businesses, we make this stuff in the States. A couple of our businesses, we have to buy it. They're not as good. They're not fully vertical, but they have custom products with the custom formulation where nobody else can make the same exact thing with the same brand, but we're not controlling the raw materials and the labor that puts it together. So the closer we can get that value chain to owning the full production capacity, the better. Now, these are small companies. The reality is we can't make everything. The world is built on suppliers and vendors that transact between each other. But all things being equal, I want a business that can go more vertical than not. I want to run my warehouse. I don't want to pay somebody else to use theirs. I want to run my customer service. I don't want to pay somebody else to use theirs. You could outsource your entire e-commerce business and run it from a laptop. You could never have a single employee. There's vendors that do everything. But your cost structure will be 300% of your revenue. The business won't work. You got to do something of great value. And so for us, we've just gone all in on owning our value chain.
Okay. I guess another issue is, I know some of the other business owners and consultants that we've had on the show, post-COVID, there's this thing about a lot of people liked working remotely, and some owners are fine with that. Other ones no, yes, absolutely not. We gotta snap you guys out of this. Do you have a strong view on that?
We've been an in-office, in-person culture. We, in Northeast Ohio, in a marketing-centric business, e-commerce is a marketing-first business. It's not ops first. It's not finance first. It's sales and marketing first. In a Northeast Ohio ecosystem, to get e-commerce marketing talent, we have to build talent. We can't go buy it in the marketplace. There aren't marketers walking around looking for jobs. So we've decided to build a culture predicated on in-person, in-office work environment. Do we have flexibility? Yes. You can be hybrid, work from home, whatever, but we are not a virtual, nationally remote, fully work from home organization. That's a cultural part of who and what we are. Is that the best decision? I don't know. It's the best decision for us. I know there's people that run really great global, virtual, remote first businesses, and I think it's fantastic. I hate paying rent every month. It sucks. But for us, culturally, it's built a lot of relationships. It's let us train people as part of the DNA of who we are. I don't know what the right decision is for somebody else. I know this is the right decision for us at this time. And we were very fast to be back in office, for sure.
Okay, so, all right, maybe I'll push it this way then. When you're looking to buy a company, is that an issue? Is that one of the criteria that you consider, or that's not something you care about one way or the other? You just like how the company is, how it is?
Generally speaking, the nature of an e-commerce business doing between 1 and 20 million of revenue is that it can transact and relocate. That's just the nature of the industry. It's not like we have HVAC technicians and trucks that need to be geographically dependent. We can move an office or a warehouse for an e-commerce company.
Well, yeah, okay. And that's what originally prompted me going down that path, because I was thinking that those would be pretty interchangeable and such. Okay.
Yep. I also think if you are a young professional, that the best thing you can do to advance your career is be at an in-person, in-office organization. I think remote is fun and it's easy and there's no travel time and no commute. But I'll tell you right now, like out of sight, out of mind, I don't care how good the culture of a remote first company is. It's very hard to replicate in-person relationship building and mentorship over Zoom. And so if you're a young person listening to this and you're questioning like what kind of company should I work for, I strongly think you should go work in person and meet people and be there Monday through Friday, 8+ hours a day, and like make the drive. I think that is a worthwhile investment, better than almost anything you could do to get face-to-face with humans who interact primarily face-to-face. Zoom fatigue is pretty real, and you should go meet some people, like take a shower and like go to work. Like you should do that. Is my advice.
And there is something to be said too, like even just getting dressed for work, going to an office. Like there really is like something, like you say, even the commute. Obviously, I don't want to be stuck for 2 hours, like in Long Island traffic or something.
I get that, but like grab a podcast and find a job that's 20 minutes from home instead of
But just psychologically, like the transition, like you got to get your work game on or whatever. Yeah, I do. And by the way, I'm zooming right now from where I live.
I'm at home today. I go to the office between 1 and 5 days a week, depending what week it is. I work differently from home than I do from the office. It's very real, and I run a business.
Yeah. Okay, well, I only got you for a few more minutes. Can we maybe zoom out just to sort of more macro issues, just to get your take on things? I'm wondering, one obvious question is, do you think, like, are malls dead? Or is the future e-commerce and, drones dropping your stuff off, in your backyard?
That's a really good question. So the St. Louis Fed puts out good e-commerce data on e-commerce penetration as a percent of retail. And we're seeing some really mixed things in kind of the community that I'm part of with e-commerce and direct to consumer. So we saw COVID pull forward a bunch of e-commerce demand, and now we're back on the long running growth rate. And that seems pretty steady. A lot of e-commerce businesses tend to be products that are discretionary in nature. And so COVID pulled forward so much demand from future years that if you needed an air fryer or a stand-up paddleboard or a piece of fitness equipment that you might have never bought or might have bought 3 years in advance, it got pulled forward. And now businesses are sitting on weird sized inventories, the inability to do good year-over-year forecasting because of all these aberrations in the COVID bump. It makes it very hard to really forecast and see what true demand is and where it's happening. There will always be experiential retail. There will always be high value retail. The question comes to like the low cost category stuff. Is Amazon the best place to get it? Or should you go to Walmart and Target to get groceries and toilet paper and such? That's a real question mark to me. For brands, it's a question of how durable is your demand and how reliable is your ability to supply it on a competitive basis. And so, if you're in a commodity space, you don't want to be selling camp equipment online in 2023 when REI is open again. You wanted to sell it when REI was closed. Now that REI's doors are open, I'd rather go to REI to buy my tent. I just wouldn't. And so I think it's very category dependent.
Okay.
We'll continue to see growth. The question is, where will it be? What categories, what segments of the market want to buy something in person? We're on a podcast. I've got a microphone in front of me. I got it on Amazon. I would not want to drive to Office Max to buy a podcast microphone. I want Amazon to drop it off. So that's a category that I think is just going to be all e-com versus other categories. You got to go see it, feel it, touch it. It's going to be bifurcated and be very culturally driven of what people want out of experiences.
Okay, last question for you, Kelsey, if you got it. Time is, I'm just curious. I'm not going to hold you to this. We're not going to do a looking back, but Are you guys worried about, the yield curve's been deeply inverted and such? A lot of people do you build that in? Like, let's worry that there's going to be a recession, or does that help you? Because then maybe people switch to more online purchases. I'm just curious if you do macro forecasting for internal purposes.
So a couple thoughts on that. One, our cost of capital is up. So the debt we have, the interest expense we have is much more expensive than it used to be. That in and of itself is not causing a specific problem, but it is eating into profitability for sure. It's a real expense. So no more free money is a real thing. Mm-hmm. When it comes to the rest of your question, no, I don't have a long-running forecast around how GDP is going to affect our business. We have a diversified enough portfolio that they kind of zig and zag, and certain parts of our portfolio do better in bad economic or news cycles, and other parts do well in good cycles. So we kind of rely on a portfolio theory for how our different brands are going to perform, and they're all in these micro-competitive markets. There's always some amount of demand in all these categories. It's a question of how we're positioned to fare there. And so soft consumer categorically is usually a bad thing for e-commerce, but good operators with good brands can thrive in any environment. I think the cost of capital is a pretty real thing. It isn't impacting valuations, and it's impacting the ability to transact at certain prices on buying businesses, for sure.
Okay, very good. All right. Well, why don't I wrap it up there? I think that's a good place to stop. So, folks, our guest this week has been Kelcey Lehrich. Kelsey, thanks so much for your time and your insights.
Thanks for having me.
And for those listening, thank you for your time, and we will see you next time.
This concludes another episode of the Founders Forum. The information provided is for educational purposes and does not constitute financial advice. Consult with qualified professionals before making any financial or investment decisions. For more information on the hosts and for previous episodes, visit foundersforum.io. Thanks for listening.